Kazutaka Hyodo, an immensely wealthy man and president of the financial firm, gathers his loyal subordinates to announce an ambitious vision, creating a vast underground empire to serve as his personal dominion. One of his aides, Tagawa, assures him that there will always be a steady supply of labor drawn from the countless young dreamers wandering the streets with naive aspirations. Among these youths is Kaiji Eko, a recent high school graduate who relocates to Tokyo in search of opportunity. Yet, Kaiji struggles to hold down a stable job, spending his days indulging in gambling and entertainment. Despite his reckless lifestyle, he craves wealth. Stuck working as a cashier, Kaiji grows increasingly bitter, blaming the world for his failures. One day, in a fit of frustration, he vandalizes expensive cars, convinced they are only owned by swindlers. His outburst doesn't go unnoticed. A group led by a woman named Endo apprehends him, revealing that he unknowingly co-signed for a friend who vanished, leaving behind a massive debt that has ballooned to 2 million yen. Adding insult to injury, the damage to the cars only compounds his financial troubles. When Kaiji insists he can't repay the debt, Endo offers him an alternative: participate in a high-stakes gambling cruise aboard a ship called Hope. Winning would erase his debts entirely. Skeptical, Kaiji hesitates, but Endo derides him as a failure and insists this is his only chance to turn his life around. Late that evening, Kaiji boards the ship, joining a group of outcasts who have similarly hit rock bottom. Tagawa welcomes the participants, explaining the game's rules. To begin, each player must purchase 3 stars, each costing 1 million yen. Without sufficient funds, they must borrow money from the company at an astronomical interest rate of 1% per minute. Success means wiping out their debts and reclaiming their stars. The game involves 12 cards depicting rock, paper, and scissors, with the goal of using all the cards while keeping at least 3 stars within a 30-minute time frame. Initially, the group hesitates to take the risk, uncertain of the fate awaiting losers. Tagawa, however, mocks them as worthless trash, declaring they must win to prove their worth. At the game's signal, chaos erupts. The first loser is forcibly dragged into a dark room, sparking panic. During the frenzy, Kaiji meets a man named Funai, who proposes a strategy. They'll both play identical cards to ensure a draw, conserving their stars while using up their cards efficiently. Kaiji agrees, and the plan works until the final moments when Funai betrays him, stealing 2 of Kaiji's stars and leaving him with just 1 card. Mocking Kaiji's naivety, Funai departs triumphantly. Furious, Kaiji tries to retaliate, but the guards quickly intervene. With time slipping away, Funai loudly announces Kaiji's last card is scissors, leaving him vulnerable. To counter, Kaiji claims Funai's final card is rock, causing confusion. Amid the commotion, Kaiji notices a bloodstain on one of his cards, leading him to a man named Edo, who had discarded the card to avoid playing. Funai proposes reshuffling all the cards to obscure their contents, and the group agrees. However, Kaiji cunningly marks a card with blood, ensuring it returns to him. Funai, confident in his deceit, challenges Kaiji to wager 3 stars. Kaiji, short on stars, teams up with Edo. When Funai plays his move, he's stunned to lose. Kaiji had anticipated his trickery and switched the marked card with one of Edo's, turning the tables. Elated, Kaiji celebrates his victory, unaware that Tagawa has been monitoring the entire game via surveillance. Funai is dragged into the dark room while Kaiji and Edo race to finish the game. As the timer runs out, Kaiji believes he's secured a draw, until Edo discovers an overlooked card in his pocket, which means both of them lose. The defeated players are sent to a harsh underground labor camp, where they join hundreds of others constructing Hyodo's subterranean empire. The conditions are grueling, with no rest, minimal food, and microchips implanted to prevent escape. Each day blurs into the next as they toil endlessly. On the 25th day, Kaiji receives his first paycheck, only to realize that most of it is swallowed by debt repayments. The camp's currency, Perica, is only valid within the confines of this underground hell. Kaiji calculates that, at this rate, he'll be enslaved for the rest of his life. Tempted by the sight of carts filled with alcohol and luxury snacks, he succumbs, spending nearly all his earnings on indulgences, leaving him trapped in an endless cycle of labor and debt. Most workers succumb to the same temptations, falling into a vicious cycle that keeps them tethered to the underground labor camp. Living paycheck to paycheck, they rarely think beyond their next meal, ensuring the company retains its grip on them. One day, a cave-in occurs and Edo is injured. Kaiji carries him to the infirmary, only to find that most patients there are left untreated due to a lack of funds. A nurse mentions a deadly competition called the Brave Men's Path, a game where the winner earns freedom, but the loser pays with their life. Realizing escape is nearly impossible, Kaiji vents his anger at the foreman. Their conversation is interrupted when a volunteer named Sahara is brought in, prepared to enter the tournament. His fellow workers applaud his bravery, inspiring Kaiji to make a bold announcement: "You will join the tournament too." Moved by his determination, several others, including Edo, decide to follow. The group is taken to the rooftop of a towering skyscraper, where they are met by Tona. He explains the rules. Each participant receives a check for 10 million yen, redeemable only in the building across the street. To reach it, they must cross a bridge made of two narrow electrified beams, which forbids crawling or falling. Meanwhile, wealthy spectators watch the event unfold as part of a live reality show, placing bets on the participants' fates. Fear grips the group as they approach the beams, but Kenji encourages them with a rallying speech, recalling how they used to walk across logs as kids. He suggests marking their shoes to help maintain balance. As the participants nervously begin the crossing, Tona and Endo observe the scene from their luxurious seats. At first, the group progresses slowly, but the weather takes a turn for the worse. Lightning flashes and a hurricane looms on the horizon, shaking their confidence. The pressure proves too much for some, and one player slips and plummets to their death. Eventually, only Edo, Kaiji, and Sahara remain on the beams. Realizing his chances are slim, Edo hands his check to Kaiji, urging him to cash it and send the money to his daughter. Despite Keiji's pleas, Edo lets go and falls silently. Upon reaching the opposite building, the two celebrate their apparent victory. But as Sahara opens a window, the sudden change in air pressure creates a powerful gust of wind that knocks him off the ledge. Clinging to the structure, Kaiji becomes the first person ever to win the tournament. Hyodo, impressed by the dramatic spectacle, congratulates Kaiji and grants Tagawa citizenship in his envisioned underground kingdom. Once Kaiji recovers, he demands both checks be cashed. However, he's informed that Edo's check is void because he died and Keiji's 10 million yen is used entirely to pay off his debt. All that remains is a meager 7,000 yen. Furious, Kaiji explodes in anger, railing against the wealthy for their cold indifference and their exploitation of lives for entertainment. His fiery words leave an impression on Hyodo, who offers Kaiji one final chance, a high-stakes card game against Tagawa. Kaiji is escorted to the gambling hall, where the rules of the final game are explained. Each participant is given 10 cards, with the Emperor card being the most powerful, followed by citizens and then slaves. A citizen card beats a slave, but a slave triumphs over the Emperor. If two players reveal matching citizens, the round ends in a tie. Players must strategize carefully as random moves are not allowed. This game draws an audience not only of wealthy spectators, but also the prisoners trapped in the underground labor camps. At first, Kaiji uses the last of his winnings to play, but his inexperience leads to a quick loss. Tona mocks him, pointing out how easy it is to predict Keiji's moves based on his expressions. Hyodo, amused by Keiji's desperation, offers him a loan so he can try again. Determined not to fail this time, Kaiji observes Tona's peculiar habit of glancing at his watch during key moments. Despite this discovery, Kaiji loses again and is sentenced to 130 years of slavery. As he's being led back underground, Kaiji replays the game in his mind, trying to uncover how Tona managed to cheat. Endo taunts him, calling him a loser and pointing out the mark of slavery embedded in his hand. At that moment, Kaiji realizes the microchip implanted in his hand was the key to Tona's strategy. But watch Tona track Keiji's vital signs, revealing when he was about to play an important card. Kaiji shares his plan to beat Tona with Endo, persuading her to lend him 50 million yen for one last attempt. Endo reluctantly agrees, swayed by Keiji's confidence and belief in her goodwill. However, Hyodo warns her that her life is now also tied to the game, as the loan puts her at significant risk. Before the game begins, Kaiji shocks everyone by smashing his head against a mirror, causing his vital signs to spike. Sitting down at the table, he briefly lowers his hand under it, further unnerving Tona, who now feels he can no longer rely on his watch. Kaiji starts hurling insults and deliberately splattering blood on some of his cards, adding to the tension. As the game progresses, Tona becomes increasingly cautious, calculating every move while growing angrier at Keiji's antics. With only 2 cards left, Tona notices a bloodstain on one of Keiji's cards and recalls the incident on the ship. He deduces that Kaiji must have swapped cards under the table and decides to outsmart him. Endo, observing from the sidelines, also believes Kaiji has made a critical error. Confident in his logic, Tona plays his card, convinced of his victory. However, Kaiji reveals his own card and wins the round. Cheers erupt from the enslaved workers underground as Kaiji explains his strategy. He didn't switch any cards, but deliberately relied on Tona's overthinking. Tona had outmaneuvered himself. Furious over Tona's devastating loss, Hyodo strips him of his future citizenship and condemns him to a life of servitude in the underground labor camp. Meanwhile, Kaiji walks away with 50 million yen. The next day, Kaiji meets Endo at a cafe to return her loan. However, as they chat, Kaiji suddenly loses consciousness. When he awakens, the money is gone, replaced by a letter from Endo. In it, she reminds him of the interest that accrued every minute on the loan and the damages to her car from before the cruise. She explains that she simply reclaimed what she was owed and wishes him luck, hoping they'll cross paths again someday. Left with only 450,000 yen, Keiji uses the money to fulfill his promise, delivering it to Ido's daughter.